Welcome to Good God, conversations that matter about faith and public life. I'm George Mason, your host, and I'm delighted to welcome to an edition of American Faith, a series that we are doing in Good God. My good friend, Imam Dr. Omar Suleiman. Imam, we're so glad to have you here.
Always good to be with you. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And I should just briefly introduce you and say that other than being my friend and colleague in the Dallas community, uh, Omar is the president of the Yaqeen Institute for Islamic Studies. He is an adjunct professor for Islamic Studies at Southern Methodist University, SMU, and he is special advisor to Faith Commons, the parent organization of this particular program. Omar, we've had lots of conversations across the years and lots of ways of working together in Dallas. And so this is sort of a bit of a picking up after an ellipsis point for us. But for others, it is an introduction. One of the things we're trying to do in this series is to make the point that there are many American faiths. There is not one American faith. That is to say that although the dominant narrative maybe for most Americans is that America was founded as a Christian nation, the truth is Christians came to these shores, but the nation itself was founded not to be Christian, that constitutional America was deliberately intended to be pluralist and to be welcoming to all religions and not to be preferring one. So then we find that there is a proliferation of religions that grows over the course of 2 centuries or more of American life. And here we have someone like you, born and raised in New Orleans, Louisiana, right?
I like how you said New Orleans right. That never happens.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, you know, my wife went to Loyola in New Orleans. So
Oh my God. All right. Yeah.
I had to get that right. Yeah. But in any case, you are American through and through. It's not like you have come from someplace across the sea, although your parents did as immigrants. But nonetheless, you are an American and you are Muslim. You are practicing a faith that is widespread now in America and is as American as anyone else's faith. But it doesn't always feel like that on the ground. Can you tell us some anecdotal ways, perhaps, in which we could understand what the everyday lived experience is for a Muslim American?
That's a great question. I would say first and foremost, yes, obviously, idealistically, realistically, those two things don't always line up, where sometimes the way that we see ourselves, we're not seen by others. And we have to refuse living up to someone else's standard of what it means to be an American, or someone else's prototype, just because we don't fit it. And when it comes to being an American Muslim, I think the lived experience depends upon many other factors. I think that there is an underlying consistent factor of living with the demonization of your faith. The faith is demonized, and the community is demonized, and the Muslim world is demonized. And so I think that anyone that takes their faith seriously, as a Muslim, deals with the discomfort of the demonization of Islam and the Muslim community. That's been pretty consistent. And Islamophobia has emanated from all quarters of political life, American political life, as well as social life and media life. And what I mean by that is that, when it comes to Hollywood, when it comes to the portrayal of Islam and the Muslim community through Hollywood, where it's constantly portraying Islam and the Muslims as a community that needs to be saved, a community that that either is vicious and malicious, or hostage to a vicious and malicious way of life, and they need to be saved from their way of life. So it emanates, Islamophobia and the demonization of Islam and the Muslim community emanates from all sides in different ways. It's packaged in different ways. However, I think that the next step or the next level of that really depends on a number of factors. So if you are African American and Muslim, you're Black and Muslim, and those two things are not mutually exclusive. The African American community is the largest makeup of Muslims in America, and a lot of times that is not what is displayed in the media. Right. Our forefathers of Islam in America are those that were brought in chains. Up to 30% of those that were brought enslaved were Muslims and had their faith violently taken away from them. And then there's a resurgence of Islam in the 20th century through the likes of Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali, right? So if you're Black and Muslim, you're dealing with being Black and being Muslim. And so that means, a double whammy in that sense, right? In terms of discrimination and bigotry. And we've seen that. We've seen the way that discrimination is compounded if you're Black and Muslim. Then if you are foreign looking, if you're an immigrant and you are Muslim, and I'm talking about, someone with a thick accent and someone that comes from a country that's particularly, being looked at as hostile to the United States in the moment, right? And that's something that you see peak in accordance with whoever we're describing as evil at the moment, yes. or focusing in on as evil at the moment, then you're facing that level of discrimination, right? You're being targeted. If you are a Palestinian Muslim, you're dealing with anti-Palestinian bigotry, as well as being Muslim. And then if you're a Muslim woman, you are a very visible target of Islamophobes, and so you're more likely to witness bigotry at an enhanced level in public life, and deal with those types of challenges, again, from all types of quarters. And so you can expect that your day to just go out and grab a cup of coffee can turn into the worst day of your life at any moment, because, the person that's serving you your cup of coffee decides to throw a comment towards you, or you're driving on the road. And, my wife being a hijabi Muslim woman, a woman who wears hijab, a Muslim woman who wears hijab, the experiences that she has, even though I wear this pretty much everywhere, the experiences that she has are far more frightening than the experiences that I have. So I think that it differs for each person in accordance with a number of other factors at that point. But the underlying theme is being exhausted by the demonization either of Islam as a religion or the Muslim community as a community that emanates from all sides.
Well, I think we should just pause for a moment and recognize that what you're saying is that the everyday life of a Muslim American or an American Muslim, we'll get to that in a moment, is one of constant anxiety, of looking over one's shoulder, of being careful, of having to monitor your surroundings. Is that fair?
I think that's fair, and I think and far more for other people in terms of the fear, in particular in the public space, those that are visibly Muslim, and particularly Muslim women. That's definitely the case. Okay,
so let's be even more specific about how in the past 2 decades this has intensified. Obviously, after 9/11, there was an enormous outrage in America about the terrorist attacks that were brought about by a certain faction of jihadist Muslims that you and other people in the Muslim community roundly condemned as well. But nonetheless, we had a reaction in the entirety of our country, not only against a specific group of people who acted in violent, murderous ways, but against an entire religion. and there have been a series of events and attacks and consequences of that that continue to be a part of our country's life in the 2 decades since that time, which also includes even in the last couple of years, Dallas being the place where more mosques have been protested by armed American citizens than any other city in America. Did I say that correctly?
Dallas definitely leads the way. So Dallas is, in that sense, the capital of Islamophobia in America.
I think people who live in the Dallas area would be stunned by learning that that is the case, because I think we have this sort of idealized version of ourselves as being a generally kind and generous and religiously oriented community that finds a way to live together in harmony and all of that. But again, when you can't even go to your place of worship without fear of passing armed protesters who are who have Nazi insignias and who are threatening the lives of the people who go. This is an extraordinary thing that I think we just need to raise up, because it's not something that the media is covering regularly, right?
No, it's not, and it's one of those things where it became just a normal part of our lives. And I'll say this: that the people that you saw, protesting on Capitol Hill, or they weren't protesters, right? But right. Those images are images that we are very familiar with. And they, of course, in Dallas, were holding Ted Cruz signs before Donald Trump, alongside their guns in front of our mosques. And this is all captured by video and by images. And so those long rifles and those chants and those threats in front of our mosques have been a regular occurrence. And I'll also say this, because I think it's important, and I hope you don't mind me introducing this element to it, but I think that the problem is it's not just the bigots in the street. It's the fact that Islamophobia is deeply intertwined at the state and policy level in a way that validates the actions of those in the streets and those that are showing up with their long rifles in front of our mosques. And so when you talk about the relationship between the United States of America as a government, the American government, and the Muslim world, it's not a good relationship, right? We have to account for the way that Islamophobia has led to state violence in the sense of our foreign policy, our militarism. Our foreign policy, specifically targeting the Muslim world, has been unprincipled, brutal, has destabilized multiple nations, and has led to all sorts of adverse reactions and problems that are not taken into account by the American public usually, because people stay, they're not in proximity with that stuff, right? I only know what I'm seeing on the news, what I'm seeing on the media. At the domestic level, the Irving mayor, who's now in Congress and was endorsed by the Dallas Morning News,
Beth Van Dyne.
Beth Van Dyne, who was the mayor of Irving at the time, who was, and I know that many people at the Dallas Morning News did not endorse her, but at least the paper endorsed her for Congress, and she now sits as a representative of this area. It was her stoking the flames initially and saying that, that there is a Sharia court that's operating in Irving, Texas, and that Muslims are plotting a takeover of government here in Irving, Texas, where we suddenly need to pass an anti-Sharia bill in Irving, Texas. And so that's what led to these flames being stoked, and we're still dealing with the fallout of that. And so Clock Boy and all of those other ugly incidents, that was not just people in the street. That was people in government too. And so Islamophobia is interlaced in our foreign policy and our domestic policy. And of course, lastly with that, surveillance, mass surveillance. the countering violent extremism, the CVE programs that have led to entrapment and deep violations of the civil liberties of American Muslims are molded in COINTELPRO, have been used against the Black community for generations now. And that, you look at the formation of the Department of Homeland Security, out of which ICE was formed, right? ICE came out of a counterterrorism reality. And look at what we're dealing with in terms of mass surveillance and just the deep violations of our civil liberties. That's also Islamophobic. Right?
And all this at a time when Christopher Wray, the director of the FBI, has said specifically that the single greatest domestic terrorist threat in America is white supremacy, white nationalists. So, we don't see that same level of surveillance, that same level of anxiety taking place with folks like that. Let me go back to now constructively some of the ways that we want to talk about where we move forward. So I think we've outlined some of the policy issues and some of the lived experience on the ground of what it's like to be Muslim in America. But I think what we want to do on this program, at least, is to give some guidance and to say, if we're to be part of the solution and not the problem, there's a certain understanding that has to come first of all, which we're working to do here. But what are some concrete steps that we could take? What are some ways that we could more participate as laypersons, clergy, as people in the political sphere, to pave the way for a greater sense of full enfranchisement in the democratic life of Muslims in America?
I think that's a great question, and I appreciate it. It takes a lot of introspection. It takes a lot of open and honest conversation. I think that first and foremost, it's important to take the time to actually listen to American Muslims talk about their lived experiences. I would say under normal circumstances, visit your local mosque. Get to know your local Muslim community. Listen to your Muslim coworkers talk about how they're feeling and the different ways in which they feel disenfranchised, because sometimes, again, that can be, there are different ways of disenfranchising someone. So it's not always just holding an AR in front of your face. It's sometimes more than that. So the different ways in which people feel disenfranchised. And I think it's important for especially those that would deem themselves as allies of the Muslim community to understand us beyond merely another checkbox or another marginalized group that you're just going to check the box and say, all right, well, let's make sure we throw Muslims in there with all the other groups that have been marginalized in America. We're a faith community. We're a community that, that feels often unwelcomed in both right and left spaces, that feels demonized in different ways. And so, not to fall to Orientalist tropes and not to fall into this idea of the Muslim community needs to be saved from Islam in order to fit in, right? So, what does it mean to embrace? And I've heard you say this multiple times, that Muslims are the test of pluralism in America, are truly a test for pluralism in America. And I appreciate that sentiment, because American Muslims don't want someone else to speak for them. They want to be able to speak for themselves. And that means paving the way for that and making sure that you take the time to really understand how American Muslims are feeling about things. And I would say that when it comes to challenging for the layperson, challenging, Islamophobia beyond merely rejecting the angry white supremacists in the street, I think that means challenging Islamophobia at the policy level, at the state level, in a very serious way. And I find multiple times that when it comes to our foreign policy, this suddenly becomes a very uncomfortable conversation. When it comes to surveillance and when it comes to critiquing many of the practices which have emanated out of the Democratic Party as well, right? Mass surveillance existed under the Bush administration and the Obama administration. It's similar to immigration, where you'll hear immigration activists say, hey, look, deportation did not slow down under Barack Obama, under a Democratic administration. We're not, that this type of policy occurs in multiple facets and under both Republican and Democratic administration.
Well, and let's pursue that even further. I mean, Barack Obama received a Nobel Peace Prize, and yet was one of the most egregious presidents in the use of drones to conduct foreign policy by the assassination and killing of Muslims around the world. Whatever you want to say about the nature of technology and military technology and its potential benefits, the consequences of the use of drones is that there is always collateral damage that happens. That there is a sense of victimization that happens then in Muslim communities around the world that intensifies the anti-Americanism because of the use of technology that that makes vulnerable and disrespects communities and a religion around the world. And this took place during the Obama administration, not during the Bush administration, not during the Trump administration alone.
Right. Not alone. So that's the key word, right? It certainly, Bush, Bush launched all-out wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and completely destroyed nations. And obviously, the casualty counts are high. And Trump certainly maintained the dronings of multiple people around the world, innocent people, but he hid the disclosures, which made it even uglier because it took an already unaccountable use of force and made it even more unaccountable. But it certainly was escalated under the Obama administration and not in any way diminished. And what that means is that a drone falls on a wedding somewhere in Yemen or Somalia, and there's absolutely no visibility of those victims whatsoever. Now, why is that important for us to discuss here? And I think this is also part of the point that, we started off this program by saying that, we're talking about American Muslims, Islam as an American religion, Muslims as an American people, that's what we mentioned, right? So I think it's important to recognize that the same dehumanization that underlies our foreign policy also underlies our domestic policy. What does that mean? If you look at the way that inner city communities are governed in the United States, there is an often unspoken but effective tactic, which is to say that these communities are too brutal but to be governed by that they can only be governed by violence. They can only be governed by brutality. And so that justifies excessive use of force because you've associated a criminal identity, a terrorist identity, a thug identity, that allows you then to justify your excess of force and power in the eyes of the part of the public that's not familiar with the dynamics of those communities that lead to the output that we see, which are just horrific images and things of that sort. And so it can't be that these people deserve justice so that we can live in peace. Because if we don't give them justice, if we don't stop doing this to them, then we're not going to be okay. Because then you're also not treating them as equal human beings. So what does that mean, by the way? What that means is that sometimes, and you didn't just do this, by the way, so I want to be very clear, but sometimes I remember Marco Rubio was in the 2016 race when he was, speaking about then candidate Trump and his saying, "I think Islam hates us." He immediately went to what he immediately pivoted to. Well, when you say that, you make it harder for Americans that live in the Muslim world and harder for our American foreign policy because they're hearing the president say, "I think Islam hates us." The fact that you pivot there is actually a problem because you have to start from, is this just towards 2 billion people in the world?
Right, right.
Almost 2 billion people in the world, right? Because when you talk about equal human beings, then you have to start from that point of it's unjust. And that's where, it's very hard for us to do so, particularly with communities that we're disconnected from at a very human level. And I always mention this about the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., that one of the things that, MLK scholars will point to is the evolution of Dr. King's thinking when he spoke about the Vietnam War, to where at the end of Dr. King speaking about Vietnam, he started speaking about it from the perspective of the Vietnamese child, not from the perspective of this is bad for America because it puts our soldiers in harm's way. No, start from like the Vietnamese child who is, having bombs drop on them and has absolutely no idea why they're being reduced by these high power weapons to dust and ashes with absolutely no consequences in the world. So that underlies foreign and domestic, and it's the same thing. It's the same thing that causes police brutality, the excessive use of force, state violence domestically, that causes the excessive use of force, in the militarism, in the military sense abroad, and that is the dehumanization of people that is born out of white supremacy and erases all sorts of people. And Muslims have been greatly diminished and erased in that sense by that machine.
So I think we've discussed this, you and I, from time to time, and that is that in the particulars of our religious traditions, we are different. And we won't erase those or should erase those in order to affirm full participation in American society. But there are common elements in all of our religious traditions that go to the point you were just making that could create the conditions for greater peace and greater participation in our country for everyone. And the Christian golden rule is one of those things, right? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. When you begin to look at the Vietnam War from the point of view of the Vietnamese child, not from your own point of view, now you're putting yourself in the position of the other person and asking, what would I want someone, how would I want someone to treat me? Let me treat that person in that way. If we were to do that in American religion, if the dominant Christian person in America, what I mean to say is the Christian experience is dominant in the culture, right? And so if Christians were to look at Muslims in America, look at Jews, look at Sikhs, look at other religious traditions and say, if I were in their position, how would I want to be treated? Things would be different, huh?
Yeah, and I think it's not just, it certainly starts from that point because as you mentioned, particularly when you're speaking in the capacity of religion, it's not just that. It's, what happens when you develop an understanding and you move beyond basic humanization of that person is that you're actually able to appreciate that person's perspective. I don't know many Christian clergy, Christian leaders that I've been able to develop a relationship with, and obviously, that's the level of that relationship has differed, right? Sometimes, look, people want to show up for the dialogue. Sometimes it's the debate. Sometimes it's the press conference, and then sometimes it's deep relationship, which I've been blessed to have with you. And that I can't think of a single time where those relationships have been built where a deeply devout Christian did not walk away from our relationship with a greater appreciation of Islam and of the Muslim community. Like, wait a minute, like, okay, these people, are really not, they're not who I thought they were. And their religion is not what I thought it was, right? And so, I give the example of with Muslim Christian dialogue. I think that is the position of Jesus, peace be upon him, because Jesus means a whole lot to me as a Muslim, a whole lot to me as a Muslim. With Muslim Jewish dialogue, I think the similarities and how law is approached, and there's so much to be
Sharia and halakha.
Yeah, when you start to look into the history and the deep relationship, under Andalus, and the way that Muslims and Jews have coexisted in the past and have coexisted in beautiful ways. So the rich intertwining, if you will, the rich understanding and camaraderie, and there's a deep appreciation there once you're able to actually get to there where you feel safe enough to talk about that stuff, and then to say, wait a minute, like, okay, this is really, really different. This is not what I thought it was. So you move beyond humanization to an appreciation of that diversity, and to not just finding it as something, a bitter pill to swallow, but as actually enriching to the American social fabric. So I think that when it comes to the religious groups of people, within our religious groups of people, starting from the perspective of dominant white Christian narrative, right, and broadening that perspective of religion, I think that there's a way there, a way forward there, which is that there has to be an understanding, coming to a place of understanding that white supremacy is as secularizing as anything on the left.
Yes.
Once you bring white supremacy into your dogma, into your creed, and you turn Jesus, peace be upon him, into a symbol of white supremacy, whether you verbalize that or not, but you use Jesus effectively as a tool of white supremacy, that is as secularizing as anything that's on the left.
Well, and let's look at what happened to the insurrectionists who stormed the Capitol just this week. This program is going to be several weeks from now aired, but on January 6th, the day of the certification of the election of Joe Biden as president, there was this march on the Capitol and an invasion of the Capitol. And there were Jesus Save signs all over the place. There were people wearing crosses and people who were claiming that they were motivated by their Christian faith in doing this. This is an affront to me as a Christian. Let's be very clear. And this is a deeply offensive way of being Christian in America, and I reject it, and want people to be held accountable for that. But now moving,
can I tell you something just on a note? As I because of my relationship with you and with so many Christians who I have built such a deep relationship with, some in my own family, I know that that's surprising. There are a lot of Palestinian Christians on my mom's side. I've got Christian relatives. The bumper sticker that went viral in Texas was "Kill a Muslim for Jesus." There was a bumper, so that was on people's cars: "Kill a Muslim for Jesus." And I saw that, and I thought to myself, if I was George or Michael or Andy or Rachel and I was driving and I saw that, I'd probably be super offended to stop using this for something so abhorrent and so ridiculously ugly, and just flashing that on your car. Imagine, and obviously the hypocrisy, the consistency, and I would be really upset. But if there was a bumper sticker in Texas that said "Kill a Christian for Muhammad, peace be upon him," I'd be pretty upset about that, right? That so outrageous. But only one of those is accepted and has a policy implication and is finding in so many different ways here in the United States. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I thought about you when I saw that bumper sticker.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, here's what we're trying to do as we wrap up here is thank you for this conversation, by the way, but I think, again, we're trying to look at what are the ways that we can, in an everyday experience of life together in our communities, begin to tie the frayed ends of the tapestry that is America, and begin to mend our souls and move toward the goal of a really beautiful pluralist religious environment. And one of the ways that we can do that, I think, is you've mentioned a lot of policy things, but it's also in not allowing things like that to stand, not just shaking your head when you're a Christian and you see a bumper sticker like that, not just letting it go when Jesus saves at a political insurrection takes place. We have to speak about it. We have to denounce it, and then we also have to make positive steps, and that is to reach out to people who are part of offended communities by these sorts of things that are vulnerable. So, for example, I think just to list a few things, if we could, to end, what are some concrete things that we could do? For example, if you are a non-Muslim American, and it's the season of Ramadan, for instance, it's Eid al-Fitr or Eid al-Adha, right? What should we say? What should we do when you are celebrating? What should we say and do when you are hurting? What are some of the ways that we can begin to repair and promote good relationships?
Thank you. Yeah, and I know that we just scratched the surface with policy, and I don't, and I apologize for taking it down that route for a little too long, and we certainly did not get to everything.
That's all right. That's all right.
Are we talking about COVID or non-COVID era, George?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Well, since I don't think we're going to be in COVID forever, I hope, let's think about it in non-COVID terms.
I think visiting a mosque is really eye-opening for people to actually get to know their local Muslim community and to get to know their local Muslim leaders. That doesn't mean that you might walk into a mosque and you come away feeling unwelcomed, but that certainly would be in the 1 or 2% of the 100%. I think that most people that have actually gone to a mosque, and it wouldn't be because of Islam or because of the Muslim community, it'd be for some personal reason probably, but I think most people that have gone to a mosque have really enjoyed their experience and have gotten to know their local Muslim community and came away feeling enriched. Most people that have taken their families to mosques and got to know their local Muslim community came away feeling deeply enriched. I think in your co-working environment at your workplace, it's very hard, especially when you're thinking about larger, companies and things of that sort, to not know that there are Muslims that are there, getting to know them. I speak at multiple, diversity and inclusion events, and the employee resource groups that allow for presentations of Islam in the Muslim community are often not very highly attended, right? It's a small group of people that will take away from their lunch hour to go and attend, but those that do attend come away and I've been working with this person for 4 years, but I never really understood your religion and never really understood who you were as a Muslim and what your concerns about, right and left politics, media, the social fabric of America, and where you feel welcomed and unwelcome. I never really got it until now. So provoking those conversations, don't force people to have to bring those things up. Ask people questions. Muslims love to be asked questions without a tone of suspicion. So ask questions,
honest questions, open questions, without the tone of suspicion. And then lastly, George, I'm going to say this: we are at the best version of ourselves when we're serving together. This is my Hurricane Katrina experience, which we're not going to talk about right now because we're at the end of the program. But what I witnessed in Hurricane Katrina of our faith communities coming together to rebuild New Orleans together was the most beautiful expression of human potential.
and the most beautiful output of faith communities and the most genuine of relationship building that I've ever seen in my life. It was truly beauty after tragedy that that just forever imprinted in me this idea that we are best as faith communities when we come together to serve our broader society. What we learn about ourselves in the process and learn about each other in the process is profoundly enriching to us as individuals and as societies.
Well, Imam Dr. Omar Suleiman, you are a gift to us all here in Dallas and as an American. And we are grateful for your leadership, for your spiritual leadership, for your friendship, and for making us better. Thank you for joining us again on Good God. And because this is...
I just want to make it clear that you two are a gift. Thank you for being a gift to all of us as well. Really appreciate you.
You're so very welcome. We count on one another, don't we?
Absolutely.
Well, as this is Friday, the proper way of greeting a Muslim on a Friday might be Jummah Mubarak, right?
You've definitely got all the lingo down, man. That's great.
Where did I learn it?
Where did you learn it? I hope it would be that you learned everything about Islam through me, but I know that's not the case.
Well, maybe not, but the point is relationships, absolutely. Right? Wanting to learn and wanting to treat one another with dignity and respect, and to be partners in this great American project that is filled with spiritual hope and potential too. So thank you so much, Omar, and God bless you.
Take care. Thank you, George. I appreciate it.